So, for those of you who don't know, my name is Zach Williams, and for those of you who have come again, awesome. I hope you guys had a great week. This week, we're going to be looking at a guy named Samuel, and we're particularly going to be looking at chapter 16 of First Samuel. I want to ask you guys, let's say that one of your friends is throwing a birthday party, right? And you are really excited because you've been knowing about this for a while and you're all ready to go. You're looking forward to the jumper, the cake, the ice cream, and just seeing your friend open up the gifts that you yourself had gotten him one as well. But then your parents told you not to go to the birthday party, even though they themselves had gone out for the evening. You were stuck at home knowing that the birthday party that you really wanted to go to was happening not too far away from your own house. And then there were some friends of yours that came by your house with their mom in her car to come and pick you up. And you knew that if you went with them, that you could still make it back home in time before your parents would have arrived. Would you still be faithful in obeying what your parents asked you to do, even though you knew that you could make it to the birthday party without them knowing? Maybe this too can be where they left one of your favorite desserts in the fridge and they told you not to eat any of the dessert in the fridge while they were gone. Or maybe you had just gotten a really cool video game and it was a brand new video game that you really were looking forward to playing, but your parents, as they went out for the evening, they told you not to play any video games while they were gone. Now that was something that you could probably really get away with because as soon as you heard your parents coming up the driveway, you knew that you could just turn off the game console and hop in bed or hop to go do something else before they ever would have found out. But they asked you specifically not to play the video game. The question is, would you be faithful to your parents in that moment? Or would you try to get away with something that you knew you possibly could get away with? So in this moment right here, as we go and we look at First Samuel chapter 16 verses 1 through 13. This is the chapter where Samuel goes to anoint David as king. Now, maybe some of you guys have heard of this message before, and maybe you also just noticed that a lot of people, when they have said this message or taught this message, that they focus more on the fact that David was the one being anointed as king. And most of the time, this message came in the aspect of David as the one who was being anointed. And they focus more on David than any other person within this passage. But as we look into this passage, as I'm going to read it out for you guys, I want to take the time to actually focus more on Samuel and who he was and how he obeyed God, whereas we're not even going to focus really on David at all. Because I believe, even though in this passage Samuel anoints David, I believe that this passage is more focused on Samuel and his faithfulness to God. And that is why I want to challenge you and encourage you about your faithfulness to your own mom and dad. So we're going to read through starting in verse 16, and I'm going to read it out for you guys, and then we'll go into it a little bit. So this is Samuel, 1 Samuel chapter 16, starting in verse 1. We're going to read 13 verses. And it says this: The Lord said to Samuel, "How long will you mourn for Saul, since I have rejected him as king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and be on your way. I am sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem. I have chosen one of his sons to be king." But Samuel said, "How can I go? If Saul hears about it, he will kill me." The Lord said, "Take a heifer with you and say, 'I have come to sacrifice to the Lord.' Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what to do. You are to anoint for me the one I indicate." Samuel did what the Lord said, and when he arrived at Bethlehem, the elders of the town there, they trembled when they met him. They asked, "Do you come in peace?" Samuel replied, "Yes, in peace I have come to sacrifice to the Lord." See, he was doing the same exact thing, saying what God had commanded him to say. Then he goes on to say, "Consecrate yourselves and come to the sacrifice with me." So Samuel's talking to Jesse, saying to consecrate, tell him to consecrate himself and come to the sacrifice with him. So then he consecrated Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. And when they arrived, Samuel saw Eliab and thought, "Surely the Lord's anointed stands here before the Lord." But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him." The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Then Jesse called Abinadab, and these are all different sons of Jesse. And he had Abinadab passed in front of Samuel, but Samuel said that the Lord has not chosen this one either. Jesse then had Shammah pass by him, but Samuel said, "Nor has the Lord chosen this one." And Jesse had 7 of his sons pass before Samuel, but Samuel said to him, "The Lord has not chosen any of these." So he had 7 of his sons pass by Samuel, and Samuel declared, "Not one of these sons has God chosen." So he goes on and he asks Jesse this question. And he asks Jesse, he says, are these all the sons that you have?" Because Jesse knew that God has sent him, right, to the house of Jesse to anoint one of Jesse's sons. So Samuel is curious. He's saying, "Hey, do you have any other sons? Jesse, are these all the sons that you have?" Maybe he heard God wrong. But Jesse answered Samuel, and he says this to him, "There is still the youngest. He's out tending the sheep." And Samuel said, "Send for him. We will not sit down until he arrives." So he sent for him and had him brought in, and he was glowing with health, and he had a fine appearance and handsome features. Then the Lord said, "Rise and anoint him. This is the one." So Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And from that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David. Samuel then went to Ramah. You see, so this passage, we obviously see how Samuel anointed David. And he was anointing David to become the next king while another king was alive. And that is the key that I want you to focus on right now. This is that Samuel did this, right? Anointed David to be the next king while another king was alive. And could this be why Samuel said to the Lord, he said, "How can I go if Saul, the king who is alive right now, hears about it? He will kill me." You see, so in this moment, Samuel was facing sure death. So he thought, right? He said, "Man, if the king at all right now finds out about this, I know that the king is going to kill me. I know that the king is going to have my head." the Lord told him to take certain things with him, right? To take a heifer with him so that he could offer it as a sacrifice, so that when he got there, he had an excuse and a reason as to why he was there. Right? His main goal, his main objective was to go to the house of Jesse, right? To listen to what God had told him to do to anoint one of the sons, right? And the Lord set this up for Samuel in such a way that when he got there, he had an excuse and a reason to be there to make a sacrifice, an offering to the Lord. So in this passage, what we mainly see right here is the faithfulness of Samuel. See, Samuel not only stepped out in faith and trusted God, right, that the king wouldn't kill him, right? And even if the king did, he still stepped out in faith and did and obeyed what God had commanded him to do, to go to the house of Jesse, to anoint one of Jesse's sons. But I find it awesome and amazing too that as the Lord asked Jesse, right, to ask Samuel to go to the house of Jesse to do this, right, he made a way for Samuel to be able to do this to where he wouldn't be questioned as to why he was there. C.S. Lewis, maybe some of you guys have read some of his books. I don't know. If you haven't, you should. They're pretty awesome books, right? He wrote some pretty amazing stuff. I think one of it was the one with the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So maybe you guys have seen that movie with the Aslan. But he says this one quote by C.S. Lewis, and he says this. He says, "Integrity is doing the right thing even when no one is watching." See, Samuel had this thing, right, where God told him to go out and to do something, right? But nobody else was around him. Nobody else heard what the Lord had asked Samuel to do. Samuel could have easily have ignored the voice of God, right? Or pretend like he didn't hear it and said, there's no way I'm going to lay my life down on the line for some kid that I don't even know, especially some shepherd boy, right? But he obeyed God, he listened to God, right? And he trusted in what God asked him to do, and he went on and did what the Lord said anyways. And that is why integrity is doing the right thing even when no one is watching. And so this verse is mainly on, like I said, the faithfulness of Samuel. So I want you to analyze on the faithfulness of Samuel for a minute. And then I want you to also reflect on the faithfulness that you may display in your own life. And I want you to ask yourself this question: does my faithfulness in my own life match up with the faithfulness that I see coming from Samuel? And after analyzing the faithfulness of Samuel, I want you to be encouraged this week to know that you as well can achieve the same faithfulness of Samuel by analyzing his faithfulness with yours. So this is really what I want you to do this week. I want you all to practice whenever your parents tell you or they ask you to do something, especially when they are not in the room, right? As Samuel very well could have decided not to obey God and go out and anoint David as king, right? But especially when your parents are not in the room or they're not around you, I want you to practice yourself being faithful to your parents, just like Samuel was faithful to the Lord, right? Because Samuel easily could have thought to himself, I'm not getting anything out of this, right? He was not getting anything special, right? I am not the one who is being lifted up, right? God is not lifting me up into something better. He's lifting David up, Plus, right, it could have been thought, man, if the king catches any one of this at all, he will have my head. He will kill me, right? Why am I going to go and anoint some boy that I don't even know? Why will I go and lift him up for sacrificing possibly my own very life? But however, even though Samuel was facing all these different things, right? However, Samuel was obedient in the midst of what could have been severe punishment for him. Samuel had the ability, right, to choose not to go and not to risk his life. However, he decided that obeying God was better than disobeying, even though Samuel was the only one that knew that God had asked him to do such a thing. Just like when your parents, right, may have asked you not to go to the birthday party and your friend came over to pick you up and you could have made it home, right, back before your parents would have even have known that you left. But you chose to be obedient even in the midst when no one was watching, right? Now I want you all to go home this week and come back next week with examples and ways in which you obeyed your parents, right? So, or it could be also somebody that was in authority over you, even when they were not present, right? So you're going to go home this week. You're going to obey your parents, right? You're going to listen to them or somebody that's in authority over you, right? And I want you to come back next week with the different examples of how you obeyed your parents or how you obeyed someone who was over you, right? And in the meantime, I'm going to share with you a spoken word that I wrote about this passage. And then afterwards, I want you to take the next 7 minutes or so to write down your own spoken word. And then I want you to come back again next week as well and also be willing to share it with me and with the other people, the other kids that are here as well, right? And I also want you to think of this question. Are you willing to be a forerunner even if you may not receive the recognition? So before you all take the time to write out your spoken word, I want to share with you one that I wrote as well, right? So think about this question. Are you willing to be the forerunner even when you may not even receive the recognition? And I also want you to think about a spoken word that you yourself can write down and come back next week and we can discuss and talk about it. A spoken word reflecting off of the faithfulness that we see in Samuel, right? So after I do this, we'll take some time, about 7 minutes or so, and take some time for you guys to write down your own spoken word, and we'll continue to go from there. But in the meantime, I'm going to share with you one that I wrote myself. And it goes like this. This is the spoken word based off of 1 Samuel chapter 16, 1 through 13, what we were just looking into, what we were just going over. And it says this: Samuel, will you be faithful? Go to the house of Jesse, anoint a son, though the king may kill you. I come in peace. Consecrate yourself and come with me. As Samuel said to Jesse, bring me your sons. I come to anoint one as king. Are they all here, those who stand before me? There's still one. He's out attending the sheep. Go get him quickly, as those who stand before me are not the next king. I will not sit till him I see. Then I saw him. He was ruddy and handsome as can be. To my surprise, he as well had beautiful eyes. And the Lord said, stand, for this is he. Anoint him, for I have appointed him as king. So I took him, anointed him with oil. The fire of heaven rushed upon him till our spirits were brought to a boil. And the Spirit of the Lord was upon David from that day forward. So that's the spoken word that I wrote, going kind of off of this little passage. And I want you guys to also take some time, 7 minutes or so, to also write out your own spoken word. And when we get together again next week, we will come together and we'll take turns reading off each other's spoken words to one another and just have some fun with this passage. I also want you guys to kind of go back and remember when we first started, when we talked about your friend throwing the birthday party. Just remember the faithfulness of Samuel. He was faithful to God, and he was able to anoint a future king. Sure, Samuel could have stayed and disobeyed God, but he would have missed an opportunity to anoint a king. And there are many times that in your lives that you'll have opportunities to obey your parents or to obey an authoritative figure, someone who is over you. Many times you'll have these opportunities. Will you choose to be faithful to God and faithful to the ones who have asked you, right, to do what they have asked? And you may feel as though you were missing out on the birthday party, right? As your parents told you not to go. But let's say when your parents got home that evening and they saw that you had stayed and that you obeyed them, right? And they brought something for you, right? Something that they wanted to give you, something that you've been wanting for a long time, right? They brought it to you because they wanted to reward you for your faithfulness to them. And they told themselves when they left, hey, let's go. We're going to pick up this thing, something that we know that our son or our daughter has been wanting for a very long time. And if he doesn't go to that birthday party like we asked him to, we will reward him with this thing that he's been wanting or that she's been wanting for a very long time when we get home. Right? And so they decided, right, to go, and even though you wanted to go to the birthday party, you decide to obey them, and then your parents come home, right, and they give you this reward for your faithfulness and for your obedience. Are you willing to obey and be faithful, even when it may seem like you are missing out on something good? God says to him, obedience is better than sacrifice. How will you be faithful to him this week? Obey God, even if you are not the one who gets lifted up. Obey your parents, even when you are not recognized for it, or rewarded for it, or even acknowledged for it. Now I want you to come the following week, and I want to share how you felt when you obeyed your parents. You could even write a spoken word about that as well, if you would like, just about the times that you obeyed your parents, right? And so we'll take this time and, you guys just go in, take the next 7 minutes or so, write out your spoken word about what you heard from this passage, about the faithfulness of Samuel. And I want to challenge you guys this week. When you go home, right? When you think back about Samuel, his faithfulness to the Lord, his obedience to God, even in the midst when he was facing death, he went on and he anointed a future king. He obeyed God and did what God asked him to do, even when there was another king on the throne, even when he was facing the end of his life as a possibility that the king could have killed him. Right? He was still faithful to God. He was still obedient to God. And that's why God says obedience is better than sacrifice. Faithfulness to God is better than sacrifice. In what ways will you be faithful to the Lord this week? What ways will you be faithful to your parents this week? So write out that spoken word, and we'll talk about it after you guys are done writing, and we'll come back again next week and talk about your week and have you guys given examples in ways in which you obeyed your parents and you were faithful in doing what they asked you to do.